else you might end up giving you some problems. The only reason there's older versions of the 18 is if you have a project which is locked on to an older version of the building regulation itself. That's why. And I'm not sure about this, but if you use this login for the website when you're gonna find the SPI instructions, I think you can use this login as well. I'm not sure about that. Okay, so now you have the file license data for BE18, and it's in our map called services, building services. Okay. Let's talk a bit about ventilation. Again, my name is Paul, and this is, as I told you before, I'm a civil engineer. My specialty is energy and climate. So, the backs for ventilations, obviously, different kinds of backgrounds are a lot of reasons to ventilate. Well, first off, it's a fun fact, so interesting to see is that 35% of the energy used for heating and ventilation, I mean, in total, the air quality, basically 90% of the time, at least this was in Denmark, that we are indoors. So basically, we're outside for 10% of the time during the day, and 90% of the time we'll be inside somewhere. The air experience is worse than outdoor by far. And yeah, so that's basically the reason why we should consider I mean, this fact that we have 90% of the time we're inside and we're breathing roughly 15 kilos of air every day. Air doesn't weigh really much, so it's a lot of air. If we have unclean air or it's a bad quality, it's not going to be good for us. So it's pretty important. Yeah. Sorry. And another reason to look into ventilation is because of the sustainable development and global impact. Basically, yeah, in order to keep the health of people better, I guess you could say, air quality is definitely something we should look into. Work environment, increased demands for comfort and health. Basically, there's some studies that show that the better indoor environment we have, the more productivity we can also achieve. It's actually the Danish guy did a huge study on this, and you see up to, depending on how good the air quality is, you can get more production in the company. Yes. So there's a lot of reasons to improve the air quality. Having a proper or good indoor environment like thermal comfort, etc., is not an old idea. It's not. It is an old idea. Sorry. You can go all the way back to ancient Rome, or from this one is not from 1988. It's just a guy who's ripped it from 1998. This is a picture of. Yeah, I don't remember the name, but it's in Rome. And as you can see, the way that they used this construction separation in Rome, they used to do some kind of before construction where there's air underneath, and as you can see, there are some air channels, ducts, you can say, like this. And what they did. I don't think you can see that, but they did is they had some people working down in these chambers, setting up fires, so the area would drop off, and then be dumped up for water, so the people, which was healthy people, wealthy people, have some kind of overheat, nice temperature. So basically, it's like one of the most ancient overheating systems that we have. And the suggestion for you is just to point out that avoiding the indoor environment that people, mankind has considered for a really long time. But this is more for comfort and not for health, I guess. Or you could say if it's really, really cold, it could be for health. You could probably get a disease or something if you can't keep your temperature. Yeah. So health is not just the absence of disease, but also includes human physical and psychological well-being. This is from WHO, and this is something that has been in more and more focus over the last time, that period of time, especially in Denmark. That we're not only supposed to think about the energy savings, but we also have to think about the indoor environment, and it's not only in relation to not putting dangerous particles in the air, but also about the as it says, the physical, psychological well-being. Do we feel good, etc. Benefit and references for this lecture are pointed out here. Again, we already looked at this one, the SPI instructions for 230. There's SPI handbook, so basically for handbook for indoor climate. There's the SPI 202, natural ventilation in commercial buildings, and Danish standard for mechanical ventilation. Some of these are not in English, but I found some books also I shared that are written in English, so you can get, it's not the same, but something similar. But the graphs and books and pictures are from here in this presentation. So what does the building regulations say about thermal indoor climate installations for heating and cooling systems? In general, it says that people, where they stay for longer periods of time, it must be ensured that the satisfactory of thermal indoor climate in terms of health and comfort can be maintained. The intended use of the activity of the room. And we're going to look into that. What does that actually mean? But basically, for longer periods of time, I've asked the people behind the building regulations for how long is a longer period of time. And the best answer I could get, it does not say anywhere in the building regulation, but they told me 45 minutes would be, for a classroom, it would be 45 minutes. So basically, if you're having a lecture on 45 minutes, your stay is a longer period of time. So in other words, if you have a meeting that is going to last at least 45 minutes in a room, a reading room, it will also be considered as a longer period of time. Rooms that are not considered longer periods of time could be hallways, receptions. If you have a room for like a copy room or server room or something like that, that could be probably considered not a longer period of time. So overall, these types of zones, we could say they should ensure that the satisfactory thermal and indoor climate. Furthermore, it says that ventilation system must be carried out safely according to safety and energy and the climate consideration. So basically, in other words, you could say that we have specific kinds of indoor climate requirements for the building. That means ensure both thermal indoor climate, but also health. And on the other side, we need to do that as at the same time as we don't. This is we have to do that at the same time as we don't use too much energy. Because we have to think about the climate considerations. So basically, those are the two most important. I wouldn't say most important. Yeah, those are one of the two most important paragraphs in the building regulation, and it's. I wouldn't say it's vague. It's just in text form, but luckily we have like the building, the SPI is building research institution in Denmark who have done you could say a mathematical or a guide to how to calculate this. How do we ensure a thermal indoor climate and great health, etc. And in doing so, having a low energy consumption. This is something we're going to look at today. Yes, so again, more specific, ventilation buildings must be ventilated to provide a satisfactory air quality. And when we say air quality, we think about the CO2 level of the air. At least this is how we measure it. And the moisture, we should not have too much, or we should not have too low moisture in the air when we consider this ventilation. Furthermore, the ventilation system, it also opens up some problems in the building, such as if there's a fire that starts in the building, well, ventilation system could actually supply the fire with oxygen. So we need some kind of fire strategy. So basically, we also have to plan and construct we have to plan the planning and construction, operation, and maintenance of the ventilation system should be carried out such that the risk of fire occurs are minimalized, and developments of the fire. There's no risk of injury of people, damage to the installation parts. So basically, that we should not be able to walk into them. Or they should, of course, not fall down or be at risk for injury, and etc. It was something that will be probably this part two is probably would be more interesting, or not. It was a bigger problem earlier when we had the radiators, the heating system in the back of the days in Denmark. At least in some cities, the temperature from the water in the heating radiator was about, at some points, in some cases, all the way up to 90 degrees, meaning that people or children that touched the radiator could actually burn themselves when it was really cold outside. So that was like one part we could talk about injuries. Also we have to consider no health risks for people or contact related illnesses. So basically, for hospitals and this example, we should create design the ventilation system in such a way that this cannot be spread from one room to another. For instance, we have to look at leakage in a such a way, and etc. And for no unnecessary energy will occur. So basically, that would be controlling the ventilation system. So if the ventilator is going to do a lot of work, or at least it's going to try to work harder and harder at the same time, we're closing off with a valve or something that will create unnecessary energy usage. So this is something we have to take into consideration while looking at ventilation. In Denmark, we have something called the Arbejdstilsynet, which is the work inspection. It's basically an institution from the government who have a lot of regulation or observation. They do some inspection regarding the working relations at the different kind of companies and make sure that they basically follow the rules that are there. And some of the rules regard ventilation, and they have and that includes that there's sufficient supply of fresh air and without drafts, etc. And you can find some of their regulations regarding the indoor climate at this website. Yeah, basically, some of them are built on this old indoor climate handbook from 2000. Okay, planning stages. So what do we need to consider in the planning stages? First off, we should look at the internal loads and what are the room conditions. Internal loads, it could be people, equipment, you can see here, work and instrument lighting. The conditions of the room is the room temperature, airflow, air moisture, airspeed, noise level, air cleanness, and etc. So there's a lot of different kind of parameters that we look at as an indoor environment when looking at indoor environment. Also depending on what kind of if it's thermal comfort, atmospheric comfort, etc. Furthermore, during the planning stages, we should also look at the outside conditions. In the winter mode, normally we look at the air temperature at minus 12 degrees, and the relative humidity is 90. I will show you later. If we look at the summertime, I just wrote not the same clear recommendations, basically meaning that depending on what kind of building we'll build, we'll use some different kinds of worst case. In some cases, the worst case would be subject to humidity, and in other cases, it should be the highest temperature. And at the same time, it's a combination of what is the air temperature outside, which we can see here, and how much solar incident do we get during from the sun. So basically, in Denmark, we can have a condition where it's actually pretty low outside air temperature, like 18 to 15 degrees, but at the same time, if the building has a lot of windows to the west or east, and during the autumn, the sun is really low. So if you have a lot of windows in the facade to the east and the west, you can actually get a lot of energy through the window. And this could actually be one of the worst cases in Denmark is during the autumn or the fall. Whereas in the summertime, the sun is like all the way up in the sky, and if you have a lot of windows in the facade, you don't get as much direct light. So that's why this one is like really unclear, because summer situation is not the same for all the buildings. It changes depending on how you design your building. But anyway, as we can see this, I would say temperature, this is temperature in the y-axis, and in the x-axis it's water content, how many kilos of water do we have per kilos of air. So basically this 70%, if we look at this, you see the shape, these are all the conditions that in Denmark we are within these one. If we pick a condition like this, 70% of the year we will be inside these conditions. So basically having an outdoor temperature around 17 degrees, lowest temperature is like -1, and with this air humidity between 100 and 60%, that would be, if we were inside of this area, that would describe 70% of the outdoor conditions in Denmark. And this one we have, if we within this one, it says 90%, 77, and the 99%. So basically, if we take all this shape here, you could say that we were describing roughly the whole year of Denmark. So basically, why I'm showing you this is that when we're looking at the summer mode, if we're looking at conditions and we're designing from this one, you can actually expect that 30% of the time, if we're lucky, the period is outside of the working hours, but at 30% of the time while using the building, we could actually have a system that is not designed big enough. But on the other hand, if we design a system like this, the system is going to be a bit too huge for the most part of the year, because basically the system only needs to run down here. But again, it depends on what does the building owner want to pay for in order to ensure, let's just say, In this case, we will probably have some periods during some hot days that the air temperature inside is going to be too hot, or humidity is going to be too high, and etc. But is that acceptable, or do we want to pay even more for the greater system in order to make sure that this never happens? So basically, that's like the question we should be able to answer as a building owner. Yeah. So further on with the planning stages, we do a climate technical analysis. And we will do a stationary period calculation, typically in the planning stages, just to make sure that how much kilowatts, for instance, different thermal indoor environment. We will look into how much it can be with the how do you call it? Yeah, you could say. I have to like find my words again. Just 1 second. Yeah. So if we do a period stationary calculation, it's basically doing I would say a one-page calculation. This is basically a quick method for calculating how much energy per second will be added to the room by the people, by the equipment, by the sun, and etc. And how much do we need to remove from the air through the ventilation and cooling system in order to keep a stationary balance. This is a pretty quick calculation, and it's just done to get an idea of how our big ventilation system should be. And more expensive, I guess, in terms of money-wise, if you have to have an engineer to do this calculation. You can do a simulation, also called a dynamic calculation, where you take into consideration the time. So basically, the chance that every people plan to be there being at the same time as the sun is gonna be there. Also, you have to take into consideration of the dynamics of the thermal accumulation and etc. All of these things will be taken into consideration, and then you do a simulation of the whole year, and then you can see what kind of you get. I guess you can say you will have a better, more realistic idea of how much air we need to improve and how much cool air we need to add in order to maintain. Yeah, I don't depending on how big the projects are. I've been in many projects where we do this one, just a fast calculation for different kinds of room. And then I've also been in projects where already in the planning stage we do some kind of dynamic calculations. If the building owner is really focused about the indoor environment, we'll probably pay for that. Yes. So first off, we'll do a detailed design of the system, looking at the individual rooms, including airflow, heating, and cooling, and air filtering, etc. And then we'll select ventilation principle and the system. Determination of type of location for the air supplies and exhaust diffusers. So basically, where in the rooms do we place the inlet and the outlet? Design dimensions, pipes for the duct system, and then we look at the components, the system's components, which intakes, exhaust, filters, dampers, humidifier, etc. are 10 steps guide for this. First step for looking at the indoor environment would be calculating the air volume, basically airflows. So how do we determine the airflow and why? Basically to size the ducts, and the aggregator are basically the ventilation unit, the AUH ventilation unit. So we need to know how much air. Basically, the first thing we should do is calculate how much air we need, because we do want to know how much air do we need in the different rooms, and depending on the worst case for all the rooms, this is how much the ventilation unit or the aggregator should supply in total. And then we look at the ducts. Each duct, you can see branching from the ventilation unit. They should also be able to contain or move contain the air volume that we actually have calculated. But in order to decide how much air flows, you should also look at the level of thermal comfort. Why do I say level of thermal comfort, or not just thermal comfort, but just level of comfort? Because as you can imagine, you can indoor environment is like it's a subject that is really based on one person's own experience, because you can actually have a room where some people will find it cold, whereas other ones will find it really good, and you can also have some rooms where people will think it's too hot, whereas others think it's too cold. There's something you probably already know. And I always bring my girlfriend as an example. She always thinks it's cold, whereas I always think it's hot. So that way, in order for us to be happy about the indoor environments, I often go around with a t-shirt, and she will have a sweater on or something, and then we can experience roughly the same amount of thermal comfort, or at least we'll both be in thermal comfort. So first off, just take a glass of water. You can always start at looking at what are the requirements from building regulation. So if you look at the building regulation BR18, the building regulation in Denmark, they have different kind of regulations for instance, teaching rooms, schools, etc. But what you have to keep in mind is that this is only the minimum requirements. So basically, in practice, sometimes this will often be, not often, but sometimes it will actually, it should be higher than the minimum requirements. So this would be, if you ask me at least, this is not something you should design your system after. It should be more something that you will check after, see if you're actually maintaining the minimum requirements. There's a standard called 1752, which are design criteria for indoor environment, basically just containing a bit of some numbers on indoor temperature depending on which type of room we have, and which temperature and which airflow, CO2, etc. do we need to contain in order to keep either indoor class 1, 2, or 3, so, which means how many people will be satisfied. Or you can also look into the ventilation and indoor climate compendium for other rooms. So the compendium, the last one, I will show you the So basically, the type of building. If we have a conference room, for instance, depending if we want category A, B, and C, and if you want to know what A, B, and C, you can always read about it. But basically, that's defined by how many people, percentage of the people in the room are satisfied with the environment. So I think, if I remember correctly, it's 10, 15, and 20, maybe, or maybe it's 5, 10, and 15. So basically, if you're going for a category C, it implies that 15% of the people in the room are going to be dissatisfied with this number. Basically, for a conference room, 2.4 liters per second per square meter. If you go all the way up, it's almost doubling up, not completely, but almost. It's 4.2, and then 10% will be dissatisfied. Okay, so this is how you can use it, but you can use these numbers as a guide, design criteria for these types of rooms. If you go to, you can find further on the compendium, ventilation compendium, ventilation indoor climate compendium. I think this one is also a part of this compendium, the English one. This is, I think this one is based on experience from Danish companies. They all sat together, or I don't know if they sat together physically, but they met together in some concept and shared their K numbers experience for different kinds of buildings. So, for instance, if we're looking at a garage, or if we're looking at a hotel, industry kitchen, etc., these are some ventilation key numbers that they have from their own projects. And these ones would be an idea to use these ones as, at least for designing the rooms. So you can see that in these pages. So before I go further, I would just like to add that there are a few of these tables in the compendiums, the Danish compendiums that I shared. So you can always open them and try to shuffle through the pages and see if you can find a table that looks like this, and try to translate it and see if you don't, let's just say, if they don't have the type of rooms or the types of buildings that you're looking at, maybe you can find them in the Danish versions or Danish compendiums, which we haven't translated yet. So keep that in mind. I also shared those. Basically, this is how you can. This is one way, a fast way of starting a design relationship, and basically finding the airflows. You could also do some calculations, as I told before, doing some dynamic calculations or static calculations, but this is not something that we're going to do in this course. Basically, then you should be studying these are numbers are based on those calculations and experience. So, choice of ventilation type. Natural ventilation is one I already talked about, basically meaning that we can get the air through gaps that we should in some way be able to control. If it's like opening and closing the windows, or if it's like some kind of valve, or ventilation opening that we can open and close, and typically the air will be able to exit. We should have something opening on the roof because of the thermal, driving factor of the ventilation. Because this one will work pretty well if there's the wind, the air is there's not windy outside, and the room is hotter than the inside. What's going to happen is that the air is going to go inside to the hotter area, and the hot air is going to go upwards, and then you have some kind of natural flow of air. But if you only have a lot of wind, it's going to be pressure into the room and exit on the other side where there's under pressure. Okay, so there's a lot of ways to design natural ventilation, but there are also some good and some bad. Yeah, so you have a mechanical balanced system here, or it typically is balanced. Basically, on the one side, we extract the air and it's hot. It's gonna go to our ventilation unit, and within the ventilation unit, we'll have a heat recovery system in which we'll recover heat from the exhaust air and give energy, or you can see reheat the outdoor air before it goes in. And this is what I talked about yesterday, that this one has a efficiency factor. Yeah, the minimum requirement for a one house store building is like 80%. Sometimes you can find some units that have efficiency factor of roughly 95, 93%. So basically, meaning that during the year, most of the year, the 93% of the energy that we take out of the room will be get back in again for the fresh air. And then we have mechanical extraction. This one, basically, we have a ventilator there and some kind of system. So basically, we start, and when this one starts, it starts sucking the air out, creating an under pressure in this room. And when there's an under pressure, basically just meaning that the pressure is negative inside here, the air is you're creating some kind of vacuum in this room, you could say, and that will, yeah, basically the physics will create a balance, so the air is gonna get sucked in through these valves or whatever you have designed. I would say today this system is not going to work on its own. This is something that you often do for the kitchen areas, and then you have another system for the rest of the building where you use this. Today, in new buildings in Denmark, you won't see this system because you can't recover the heat by doing this. But I would say I have tried to live in a building, in a story building from the 1972, which had this system, and it was constantly running all day, all night. And I've never been in a building from the 70s that did not have any kind of problems with the internal environment. It was always really good, but I would also say that my heating was a bit higher. This one, in terms of ventilation, it's pretty good. Except if you're like staying too close to the windows during the winter time, it will probably be a bit cold, but basically this one works really good for the indoor environment. But it's going to be energy expensive because you're always taking cold air into the building and just leaving out hot air. And when you do the combination of these two, you will put these one in the, maybe in the above the kitchens, and it will only be turned on when you're actually using the kitchen. In that relation, you don't get a lot of energy lost. So I think we're gonna skip this part because the time is really moving fast. So you can do that. I think you should do this in your groups, probably when you're doing your project. So I'll just continue to the next one. I can see that I've been talking roughly in 45 minutes. So I think we should go out, have a small break, and get some coffee. Oh, sorry. Yeah, let's go grab a cup of coffee. I'll read your comment afterwards.